Ready to light that fire by doing the things that make you come alive? Welcome to Health Raisers, a podcast for wise women. I'm your host, Dr. Nadine. I left a soul-crushing medical career full of bad news and evolved into a joyful health integration coach, helping hundreds of women find their healthy. You're more than your dress size. Stop putting up with toxic relationships, swallowing your true emotions, and sacrificing your mental health. Stop using your body as a battlefield. You're always giving. You deserve to put yourself first, not just for your sake, but for those you love. Wise women, let's make ourselves a priority right now. It's time to raise some health together. Hello, wise women. Today, my guest is Abra Berens. Abra is a Michigan chef, author, and former farmer. Through every recipe written and meal served, she aims to tighten the connection between eaters and growers. She believes we can invest in a stronger, more equitable food system for everyone, from producers to grocers to consumers. She's the author of Roughage, A Practical Guide to Vegetables, a 2020 Michigan Notable Book winner and James Beard nominee, as well as Grist, a practical guide to cooking grains, beans, seeds, and legumes. Her dinners at Granor, which I love, in Three Oaks, Michigan, made her a James Beard semifinalist for Outstanding Chef Great Lakes. Much deserved. Abra, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled.
So today's theme is our relationship with food and having a healthy relationship with food. And I love to cook. I adore the kitchen. I'm in there most of the time. And so I find chefs fascinating. So whenever I can actually have time with a chef, I love it. So as we dive in, you've been doing this for a couple of decades. So I'd like to ask you about your relationship with food yourself, what you've noticed over the span of time.
Let's start with a big one.
I dive deep.
Yeah, I love it. I'm not a small talk person, so this is perfect. My relationship to food, I think it's different than most people would think. Like even last night, I had an offsite event in Grand Rapids at Cafe Mamo. It was their 5-year anniversary, and they're good friends, and so I was helping them. And I saw a friend of mine from high school came to the dinner. And we hadn't seen each other in years. And I was asking, they live in Grand Rapids, and I was asking her where she eats in Grand Rapids. And I said, I pretty much come to Cafe Mamo and One Stop Coney. And she was like, what? One Stop Coney? And I was like, yeah, the chippy dippy dog is so good. And it was like, so I think that most people, because I work at an organic vegetable farm, because there's actually 3 books, one on vegetables, one on grains and legumes, and one on fruit. I think a lot of people, and I do believe in a regional food economy, but it's not, I don't know, I don't feel puritanical about it. I feel like I want lots of things. And the reason I love One Stop Coney is it's a mom and pop shop. It's creative, it's interesting, and like an olive burger is really good. It's also, an olive burger is a huge part of Michigan's food tradition. There was right now my mind is blanking on the name of the chain, but I think it's QP. That's why. It's like, because it's spelled the same way as the mayonnaise company. There was a QP regional chain that made these olive burgers. And so like, it's a thing. And so supporting that is just as important to me as like, I'd rather support a place like One Stop Coney than Driscoll's Organic out of Mexico, where you're not totally sure, like, and it's still big business,
A lot there. Okay, so
yeah.
I'll pull on a couple of those threads a little bit later, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into your relationship with food to ask you how cooking makes you feel.
Oh, cooking makes me feel great. It's like it's something I love to do. I love it because it's very practical and it's creative, and also it's the practical arts, which I think is really amazing. And it makes me feel fulfilled. It also serves my like desire to organize things. It's like a very efficient process for me. And it's interesting. Like I was thinking about this as I was talking nonstop about hot dogs, that like, maybe what you're asking is like, what's my relationship? Like, do I have a healthy relationship with food and like what I eat? Or is there any sort of like contentious issue, with being around food all the time? And the truth is that like, it's kind of changed over the years in that like I put on some weight when I had my son, and then I turned 40, and then I switched to more of a desk job. And so all of a sudden I feel like I've had more of that relationship with food where it's like, there's like a caloric value in my mind, and I've never been oriented that way. And so I'm kind of suddenly realizing when people don't feel comfortable around food or don't like, have a lot of shoulds associated with it, I think I'm understanding that more than I ever had before. And I think I was unfairly dismissive of those concerns before, and trying to always be sure that like, I feel very lucky that I don't suffer from disordered eating. Food has always been like a place to connect, so there's like a lot of components to it. And it always just feels like I want people to have that healthy of a relationship with food.
Bringing you Health Raisers is possible because of these incredible sponsors. Feeling the need for a little pampering? Do you want an escape from the hustle and bustle of daily life? Mac Salon and Day Spa is your destination for relaxation and rejuvenation in Southwest Michigan. Get ready for a retreat in the woods. Mac offers comprehensive services tailored to your needs, including massage, facials, nails, waxing, and hair treatments, ensuring you feel refreshed and beautiful. Whether you're preparing for a special occasion or simply treating yourself, the experts at MAC are committed to helping you look and feel your best. Their commitment to wellness isn't just about beauty. It's about balance, confidence, and feeling amazing in your skin. Visit them today and discover why they're Southwest Michigan's premier choice for all your beauty needs. In the mood for coffee, tea, yummy pastries, or cool swag? My friends at Infusco have got you covered. Infusco Coffee Roasters is a cozy neighborhood coffee joint in Sawyer and St. Joseph, Michigan. Infusco stands for a healthy community. They craft irresistible seasonal drinks, sourcing local artisans' products. The flavors shine from quality ingredients, and their beans are roasted on site. They do not hide behind tons of sugar. Every time I go, I'm greeted by my name with a smile. Bad service is just non-existent. It feels like stepping into a friend's living room. They keep it personal. Old school, eclectic coffee mugs on the wall, fun merch, including stickers designed by artists, t-shirts, and sweatshirts. It's the perfect place to get to know your neighbors and chat with tourists. You will always find people deep in conversation. Special events keep it fresh. Community, health, the heart of Sawyer. That's Infusco. I hope to meet you there. So you've worked in professional kitchens, you're at Granor, you're overseeing making these incredible dinners for groups of people. I often wonder, because I basically feed anywhere from 2 to 4 people, maybe at the most at Thanksgiving, a little bit more. But I think about this, and I'm sure you're aware of The Bear, who's not.
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay. So they really portray the restaurant business in a really, in a really great way, realistic way, the stress level involved. And I've thought about this while watching. Part of the stress is this, well, of course, there's the speed, not letting people wait, but there's also making sure everybody's kind of getting the same thing, the quality control. Right. How do you manage that stress? Or do you find it stressful?
I think that it's interesting because I'm undergoing a career pivot as we talk. And so when I think about my time in the food world up until this point, one of the things I feel like the most proud of is to have, both with my time farming. So I farmed for 8 years and we did dinners on our farm, which laid the groundwork for the program that we built at Granor.
Okay.
That's what allowed me to come here with a degree of authority. And what I think is the most interesting thing about that model is that it really undercuts these things that are the most stressful parts of restaurants. And so a traditional restaurant, you don't ever know who's coming. And maybe you do because of reservations, but like they're not locked in the way that they are with tickets. And you're preparing a menu for people to pick and choose off from versus, and so there's always this kind of like, you don't know how many people are coming. You have to prepare it all. You don't know what they're going to order. 100% the like dish that the chef is the most excited about is the one that gets ordered the least. It's like, that's like a pretty average rule of thumb in a restaurant. And so like, that's why you'll have a server that's like telling you about this thing that's really special that you might have glossed over on the menu. That's because it's like what the kitchen is the most excited about. And in a restaurant, I came up in kitchens that were like not interested in being welcoming spaces to vegetarians, let alone vegans, let alone gluten-free. And I don't feel that way. I feel like we are really in the hospitality and entertainment business more that this is not a soup kitchen, And so we're not feeding for sustenance. We're feeding for this other thing. And so with that, the model that we hit on both at Bare Knuckle, the farm where I worked, and then, really developed at Granor is treat it as a form of entertainment. You're buying a ticket to it. It's a non-refundable ticket. And you have to tell us what your dietary restrictions are. Then it is our job to take all of that information from the harvest list to the guest list to the staffing that we know that we have and create a menu that is eminently executable so that everyone's experience is flawless. And to do that level of flawless programming when you can't solve for those variables, I find to be very difficult. And I think that's what most of the stress comes from. That kind of sounds like I'm just trying to make it easy on myself. But really, the other kind of balance to that is that what we're trying to do at Granor and kind of the motivator for me in my life is how to use a dinner to be a window into agricultural work, because so few people interact with farmers. Only 2.7% of America's population are farmers. So even if like for every one farmer in the family, there's one other person, that's only 5% of our population, or maybe 6, that really has direct contact with a grower on a day-to-day basis. And so thinking about these dinners are a way for people to understand why we don't have tomatoes at the beginning of June, or why the fact that Swiss chard and beets are the same plant and they were bred to show different attributes, things like that, let alone like on the grain side where you're looking at global economies, 18-month-long cash flow documents. Like there's so much to that industry. And so I think those are kind of the interesting parts of that. I don't feel like our model of ticketed dinners is stressful in the way that a traditional restaurant is stressful. Which the other thing that most restaurants don't control is when people choose to arrive. We have it pretty orchestrated to take those variables away. And by taking those variables away and taking back some of that control, I think that we're able to fulfill a mission and provide a better experience. And so like the Bear, I didn't feel like a lot of chefs are like, oh, I can't watch it. It's like trauma. It's like itchy, like scratching a scab of trauma or something. I didn't feel that way. But I will say that the episode in the first season when the ticket printer is going crazy, when they open up online orders without it being fully thought through, like that sound is very triggering. Like that sound is like ubiquitous across kitchens. And I think they use the sound mixing very effectively on that. Yeah. But I will say the thing that I thought has not been talked about with the Bear that is so interesting is and again, no spoiler alerts for people, but when I forget which season it was, but when the like fancy restaurant that everybody came up in is closing, and Olivia Colman is the actor, and they do the funeral for the restaurant, which is, I've never heard of doing a funeral. I like the idea, but it's not something I've heard of really. She gives a talk that says like, you know, we pour our lives work into making this food for people, so that they can have a space to like connect and like all these things. And she was like, they never remember the food. Sorry. And she says it with such beautiful, like, it's just this like dismissiveness to all of this work. And like, honestly, that's kind of how I feel about it. And it resonated so much because I was like, very few people can remember the nuances of a menu that we like spend our days poring over. And so, but what they leave with is how they feel. And so it's like that Maya Angelou quote that like people don't remember what you say, but they remember how you made them feel. And so like that also helps mitigate the stress where like we have this perfect dish and oh no, we don't have the parsley. Oh, we've got dill. Who cares? You know, it's like, it just doesn't matter that much. And we often, both in my life and so kind of therefore in the Granor kitchen, a lot of times it's like we'll work through like a really difficult problem and like all of the different scenarios and like thinking it through. And then in the end, we're like, and nothing matters because like this is not.
Okay.
We don't work in a hospital. There are not bombs dropping on our heads. And so maybe we should spend some of our energy trying to make it so that bombs aren't dropping on other people's heads.
I understand. But okay, a couple of things come up for me. What you talked about, like the customer not being aware of some of the nuances that you might be excited about. Like, I'm one of those people that wants to know what you were excited about. Like, I like details and I love food. And I love to cook. So kind of like give a couple of examples of things that we might not know.
Well, so here's an example. We did a dinner with Jason Hamill when the Lula cookbook came out. And I like adore Jason Hamill. He's a mentor of mine. I wanted him to be so happy and so proud. And but the way that our menus work is that we very rarely bring in outside product. And there was a dish on the menu that had, it's like lamb meatballs with sauce soubise, which is like an onion sauce where you slow cook onions and then blend with butter and a little chicken stock, and then you blend it. And it's really lovely and it's very simple. And then has grapes, something else. Well, we did this dinner in October and we were at the very end of the Granor onions, and I didn't feel comfortable buying in onions like from the store.
Sure.
And so we made the sauce soubise, and it was going to be tight, like for our portioning. We had about a half an ounce per person.
Okay.
And so we told him that and put him on the plating, which was probably my first mistake, because he was plating it the way he would have plated it at Lula or the way they played it for the book. So we ran out. And, at one point I was like, we are not going to make it on this. And so I was just like, chef, we're not going to have enough. The best thing we can do is substitute sour cream. And I said, the sauce soubise is not written on the menu. And so, because sometimes chefs are like, if it's written on the menu, then it's like, it might as well be carved in stone. It's like they're unwilling to change it. I don't know if Hamill's that way or not. But I was like, it's not written on the menu. This is a substitution. This is the best we can do. We need to make this switch now. And he was not mad, but he was upset and like, was kind of like, but it's not on the menu. And I was like, I know it's not on the menu. Like, it's not written on the menu. We can make this substitution. And the other tables that like, we have 2 tables that are going to get this sub and they're not going to know. And also, a big thing of sour cream underneath some like crispy gnocchi and lamb meatballs with grapes is like effing delicious. And so I'm like, this is fine. And so like, that's just something where I was reminded, like, he composed that dish and felt very attached to keeping that detail the same. I don't care about that stuff as much. And so the vibe of a creamy sauce that's going to catch everything on the plate was fulfilled. Nobody would have known the difference. It doesn't matter. Noted. Or like what I was saying earlier about like the dish that the chef is excited about is not the one that gets ordered, is like, trying to remember one that I had at V when I worked out there. I think it was like a burrata dish, and it had these like crispy wheat berries on it. But the way it was written on the menu, it sounded like it was a wheat berry dish. And I was like, no, this is like a burrata dish.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we switched that language, but like the thing that we were excited about was the crispy wheat berries, and they were sprouted and then crispy. And so it was just one of those things that like nobody else cares about wheat berries the way that like the dorks in the kitchen do. But like creamy cheese, yeah.
Okay, talk to me about your relationship with how you look at, because I'm sure it's different in a professional, in a restaurant setting versus these more family style greener dinners. Because I wonder this, because I'm a nerd. When I go to a restaurant, sometimes I feel I like connection. So sometimes I feel like I wish there was a way I could feel more connected to the source. I know sometimes you have restaurants, that's why they have those open concept kind of things, so you can see that. Then other times you don't. But do you ever feel that you're lacking a direct connection with, I know, because it's weird. It's like you're serving something from the heart with love. You're making people happy. You're helping people celebrate. You're soothing people, but yet you're not directly interacting with them. There's a bridge, that plate of food. Does that make sense?
That's another reason why, like, I'm actually not a very good restaurant chef. But like the Grainer events are built to suit my preferences and my skill set. And so like in 2020, because we had canceled the Grainer dinners, my friends opened a restaurant called Farm Club up in Traverse City. And it's Loma Farm. They do all the farming. And then Farm Club is this like restaurant that is fed by that farm. And they're like they're like some of my favorite people in the whole world. And we had Nick Tyson, the grower there, an owner, said he wanted to his dream was onion rings, but made with these Elsa Craig onions, which are an heirloom sweet onion. And Elsa Craig is the grower's daughter. So like the person who developed the seed stock, and his daughter's name was Elsa. And so we had these Elsa Craig onion rings on the menu. And I felt very proud to like bring his vision to life with my skill set, which is like, instead of a breaded and fried onion ring, it was a tempura. So it was like super crackly and crunchy. And then we had maple syrup and sriracha, like a fermented hot sauce, kind of like a sriracha, as the like glaze over the top. And they were great. I don't think anybody who got them knows anything about Elsa Craig. And like, that's a bummer for me. Like for me, the beauty is in that connection and in like telling Mr. Craig's story and our story about like how they came to be, that a sweet onion just has more water in it than a storage onion. And so it has the shorter season, which is why we have them earlier in the year. And like, all of these different things. At Grainer, we get to do that both on our farm tour before the dinner and also table side. So what we prioritize is we have far less front of house staff. We actually have far less staff than an average restaurant, because we're able to constrain some of those variables. And also we prioritize, a big part of working at Grainer is that you have to expect that you are a public face of Grainer at all points in time. Okay. So like, you don't get to work on the line in like a crappy t-shirt with your hair unkept and cursing and drinking a beer. Like, just doesn't work for us. And in fact, you have to like then be pushed to go out from behind the kitchen island and either deliver the food that you've made, help clear the food. Like it's one team. And that also allows for more of that connection to be made, because you get to like chat with people. They can ask you their questions. So for me, I mostly walk tableside now. And so when I'll drop off the Elsa Craig dish, then I get to talk about heirloom seed stock out of Iowa and Mr. Craig's daughter, and like how seed breeding is a very modern process, that people don't necessarily know.
So you're not power tripping, because that just occurred to me the way you were talking. It's like you think of chef. Oh. This esteemed person who's untouchable versus, because a lot of the celebrity chefs, on when we see them on TV and everything, seem untouchable and
Yeah.
otherworldly. They're made to be put on a pedestal. But the way you're talking, there's not this power dynamic by you coming out from behind and personally talking to people and answering questions and
Yeah.
and showing them what you made.
Which again is like, it just suits my style. I would say that if a chef is that way, my gut is that they probably are socially anxious, or they're egomaniacs. And I worked after cooking school. I worked for Sky Gingle, who has since passed, but she was like a very important mentor for me. And I remember her saying at one point, she ran this place called Petersham Nurseries. It was in this beautiful glass Victorian greenhouse in Richmond, which is just outside of London, well-heeled suburb of London. And she did 3-course. It was a 3-course lunch restaurant. And so very fancy, like dirt floors in the greenhouse, but then like very fine crystal, very fine china. And the first courses, her plating style was so beautiful. And it was like the first course was always like tall and beautiful. And the main course was always very low and flat. And then dessert was like very simple, but elegant, but like no more than 2 components. And I was talking to her about menu theory at one point, and she was like, well, we host a lot of business meetings. It's a lot of times like people are still kind of like settling in when they get their first course. And so you want to give them something to talk about. So it's like beautiful and something to like engage with. By the time the main comes, they should be in conversation. So you don't want anything that's going to like physically impede the flow of food, which I think is really beautiful.
That's genius.
Yeah. And then she said, and can you imagine anything more embarrassing than wanting the people at your restaurant to be thinking about you instead of the people that they're with? And like, this is why I loved her so much. She was like a total diva in like the best possible way. But she said to me at one point, she was like, you have to remember, before I was a diva, I was a single mom with a heroin problem. And I was like, yeah, that'll do it. And so she was like very no nonsense, and like very, very real. And she just said like, and she said that to me in my mind is a difference between a cook and a chef. I don't want to be a chef. I'm just a really good cook. And then she said dessert, is 2 components because no one wants something fussy at the end of a meal. They just want to like have that like little gild of the lily, and that's it. But yeah, so that's how we feel about it at Granor. I think some people do want people to be thinking about them, or like, and that's probably okay. That's why a lot of people, like those big personalities, sell really well, and people love it. There's a movie called Tom Popo. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, Nadine. Like, feel like interrupt.
I am loving it, and I'm jumping in when I need to.
Okay. There's a movie called Tom Popo, which is like very, very niche, cult classic. It's a Japanese spaghetti Western about this. It's an amazing movie. There's a woman she and her husband run a ramen shop. Her husband is killed by this cowboy, like who knows why. And then the cowboy ends up like staying with her to like help her get her ramen shop like off the ground to like save their family or whatever, as penance for killing the husband. And so they end up touring around these different ramen shops. And the scene I remember the most is they go to this ramen shop. It's packed with people. It's so full of people. And the ramen chefs are like throwing the noodles, and it's like, hi, 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 hi. And it's like really big movements and things like that. And then they get the ramen, and it's not very good. And the guy says, yeah, they're not selling ramen. They're selling a show. And so like, I think that's true. I mean, everything is fashion, right? Except, well, I mean, even fashion is fashion, but like, I think that they're selling something else, and a lot of people have that. So
this weaves very well into the next kind of section I want to talk about. I want to get into this idea of sustenance versus pleasure. You mentioned it before, so it's a great segue for it. I want to talk about that idea of what a restaurant is for, what coming out to eat is for, which tends to be about, let's just put it under the broad umbrella of pleasure versus when you're at home, maybe where it's a little bit more practical and it's about sustenance. Tell me about the transition from work to home, and if there is one.
Hmm. For me, there's very little difference.
Okay.
But that's pretty, I think that's pretty unique to me.
Mm.
I mean, I guess I like one of my things that surprises people a lot is that like we usually have a stash of like Jack's frozen pizzas in our freezer because like sometimes you just need to eat, and like a Jack's frozen pizza with like good Granor greens on top and then like some chili oil is like really good. I would never serve a Jack's frozen pizza at a Granor dinner, so like they're not one and the same. But you know, my husband Eric will come to dinner sometime and inevitably people will say like, "Do you eat like this at home?" And he's like, "Yeah, kind of." It's not usually 7 courses, but it's not that different from what we eat, and that's just because that's my style. You know, I know people who have told me that the definition of a great chef for them is that you can cook a perfect bistro dinner, like a French bistro dinner, one night, and then a Szechuan dinner the next night, and then a luau dinner the next night. That's not me. I'm not that chef. I have one style. And it's pretty through and through. And then it's just refined and has more elements when someone's paying for it versus when they're just at my house or if they live with me. But they're not speaking separate languages. And then as far as like, I think that point of view gets to what I think the role of a restaurant is, or what I hope for out of a restaurant. And it's actually something I've just recently been thinking about because I went to a very, very dear friend of mine's flagship restaurant. It's in Midway, Kentucky, and it's in this beautiful old colonial house. She is known for taking Kentucky traditions and keeping them alive and making them approachable to people and preserving those traditions. It's like her thing. And we went to dinner and I left. The food was delicious. It was like so good. But I left feeling like a little disappointed and I couldn't figure out why. And I was like, am I just like unsatisfiable? Like what? Did my like 4-year-old ruin the dinner, which is also very possible. Like, you know, things like that. And then what I realized is all of her restaurants have grits, soup beans, ham steak, like biscuits, all these things that are like Kentucky centric and are telling the story of those growers and those producers and those traditions. They were not present at the flagship restaurant because that's the fine dining restaurant. So like, for example, there was like a polenta frica as the appetizer, which is like a polenta stick and it gets deep fried, super crispy. And it had like a creamy sauce and pickled peppers and these like roasted mushrooms that were so good. It was delicious. But I was like, oh yeah, it said polenta on the menu, not grits. And so I think what I was expecting was like a fine dining version of what she has in her other restaurants, which are much more like everyday. And so and it's like just funny. It's like, what is the role of this restaurant? It's really like, it can be whatever the chef wants it to be. But my expectation was this one thing. And I didn't feel it, even though my meal was perfect and delicious. And like, I'm still thinking about the pasta course that I had, you know.
What do you think is the role of fine dining versus, I mean, there are different types, many different types of restaurants, right? From fast food to fast casual to all the way up to fine dining, you know, because I'll hear this sometimes from people and it's just kind of a little nascent concept that's coming up for me right now, where we tell ourselves stories about ourselves and how we eat and what we'll eat and where we'll eat. Because I'll have people say things like, so you mentioned fine dining and everything is usually, the idea that comes to mind is smaller portions, richer, fancier, prettier. And then I've talked to people who go, I hate eating like that. You know, they give me nothing. I'm not full.
Yeah.
It's just these nasty sauces. And,
yeah. Your stomach's going to hurt because of like how manipulated it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think of how we talk to ourselves about how we
Well, I mean, there's a
choose
lot
to
in that.
eat.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question. And I would say, I don't tend to gravitate towards fine dining. And I'd like to come back to the fact, like, is Granor fine dining? I think we should come back to that like idea in a second. I don't tend to gravitate towards fine dining anymore. I definitely did when I was earlier in my career. Like, I was interested in it. And in my mind, it plays the exact same role that haute couture fashion does. Like, you cannot walk to the bus in a haute couture outfit. You will look ridiculous. It will like come off of you and like, you know what I mean? Like a big hat, you know, whatever it is. Or like purple shoes that are like 18 inches high. But haute couture fashion and, you know, contemporary very fine dining has a role in driving the creative process forward. They are leading a lot of those charges, and in a very impractical way. Their goal, their like benchmark for success is not practicality. And I think that's fair. I think that's fine. And that's where, for me, I sort of just like, it's just another genre. In the same way that, like, I think that, I mean, to say I don't eat fast food always comes off. We're also talking about class here. And like, it's very hard to separate these things out, because if I were to say, like, I don't really eat fast food in the same way that I don't go to fine dining, like, I'm much more middlebrow, but that comes off as classist, because it's not that it's lowbrow. It's that I'm not often in a position where that like speed of that meal, I don't find comfort in some of those foods. Like, I mean, I still love McDonald's French fries, but like,
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? You know, like, they're designed for your brain to like them, you know, like chemically. But like, it's just not a part of my like world. But I like a burger and I like a hot dog, and like, I like those things. Yeah, Jack's Pizza. So I don't know. It's kind of like one and the same to me, that they're neither one is like particularly, it doesn't have much utility for me. But I think that then the question I thought you were asking is like, how do we balance highbrow dining with the fact that in where we are at Granor, 66% of students in our public school system would qualify for reduced or free lunch. You know, how can we stomach how much we spend on an experience or a meal with the fact that there are people in the richest country in the history of the species going hungry, and not even just going hungry, who are just skipping a meal because,
that's the other thing. That's a whole other can of worms, because, you know, you look at women, especially through the years, through the decades, and how it's been one version after the other of, to me, disconnecting from your body and disappearing as much as you possibly can.
Get as thin as you can. So they might not.
And that involves usually a terrible relationship with yourself and therefore with food. I guess that's kind of part of what I was asking too, with the whole how you choose to eat. I'm the type of person who eats fast food. I can't do fine dining. I'm the type of person who eats this because of whatever my circumstances are, or I am above it all, generally speaking, you know, and I will only eat the best of, quote unquote, because it's a story. It's tied to your identity.
Right. So the way that works for me, and I have thought about this a fair amount, and I actually write about it in Roughage, that like, my concern with writing a vegetable forward cookbook was that it would equate, it would have the perception of equating vegetable consumption with morality or highbrowness.
Yes.
And that's not the case for me. What is the case for me, I wake up every morning thinking about cinnamon rolls. I want a cinnamon roll every single morning. What I've come to find out is that if I eat that cinnamon roll in the morning, I will feel like garbage the rest of the day. And so it is not about, I think that like, if I were to advocate for any ideology around food, it would be figure out what makes you feel good. and do that. And and that's it.
There's so much contradictory messages. And we've talked about this earlier in the conversation too. You mentioned style and fad and fashion and things come in and out of fashion. It's driving me crazy right now. And I've actually reached out to someone to see if I can get a doctor or a dietitian to come talk about this. If someone talks about having more protein one more time, and I know we will, but it's like, oh my God, are you guys kidding me? We're in the United States.
I know.
What is so much protein? What is the percentage of people who are actually vegan or vegetarian?
Right.
Okay. So like protein is not our problem.
Fiber is our problem.
Exactly. We can't seem to, is it just that it's not sexy? It's not capitalistic. It's not.
Doesn't have a big lobby behind it.
Right.
Like the beef industry.
Exactly right. Where just eat food and see how it makes you feel. And there is a moral judgment when, to be honest, I don't know a lot, but I haven't necessarily met too many vegans who are
healthy
and who are not a little bit on a high horse. Because it's not just, I'm eating this because it makes me feel good. Generally speaking, it's all, but there's also I'm not killing animals kind of thing. Right. It's like, well,
you know who I think actually is leading that charge? Like the vegans I enjoy interacting with the most are the Black Afro-Cuban vegans. There's a long history of Black veganism that is tied to a connection to the earth in a way that I think is not performative and is not looking down your nose, but also is tied to spirituality versus a religion. So like, the Rastafarian tradition has in part a veganist side to it. And the veganism of do no harm, I think the vegans who actually feel that way are generally pretty remarkable. Just like if Christians actually wanted to be like Christ, they'd all be pretty remarkable, but like maybe that's not the scope of this podcast. But it's the same.
You just dropped a little bomb and it's like, I'm just gonna.
Just let that sit over there. Yeah. And I mean, it's true for every religion too, like we can talk about all the big ones and it's all the same from Hindu to Jewish, like across the board. And so I think what it is for me is that's why the North Star is do what makes you feel good, because food is supposed to make you feel good because you are literally giving your cells what it needs. And it requires a level of deliberateness, intentionality, and self-possession to say, today, the breakfast that's going to make me feel good is like lentils and a poached egg and a big green salad. And tomorrow, the breakfast that's going to actually make me feel good is a cinnamon roll, because like that's what the day is. Because I like whatever, like I want to feel crappy, I want that like sugar rush. I want that like crunchy sugar.
Or maybe, it's the sugar rush, but maybe it's the sugar rush. We're not just like, it's not eating in a vacuum, it's context. So maybe you decide to have that cinnamon roll because you're on vacation. And then when you leave the restaurant, you're going to go for a 5-mile walk.
Totally.
Because you're looking at different sites. Right. So that's a lot different than, and maybe you need to, and that's okay too.
And it's just being honest with yourself and also taking the shoulds out, and that's another part of roughage too, is like the shoulds of the world do us no good. And I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but my mom always said, woulda, coulda, shoulda, you'll should all over yourself. And I just like, it's so crass and I love it. But it's true. But it's true. And so for me, and I still struggle, I think we all struggle with that because there are ideas about who we want to be, who we're supposed to be. And you are communicating your identity with some of these choices.
Yeah.
So this gets back to, is Granor fine dining? I don't know that it is. It's expensive, but it's not fussy.
Yeah, and
And
I don't look at it. Okay, so it's a fancier presentation, but I don't think of it as highbrow fine dining unattainable
no.
because of also the way it's presented. It's presented family style. You're
Mhm.
talking to people you don't know. You're getting to know people you don't know, adjacent to. So it doesn't feel
Yeah.
like one of my. I loved it. It's one of the things I can never forget. My husband and I went to French Laundry a long time ago.
Mhm.
I loved it. I loved everything about it. I did. But it was because it was just so special.
Yeah.
And it was decadent. It was just what we wanted, you know?
Yeah.
And it was luxurious.
Mhm.
It was unbelievable.
Totally.
But it didn't feel like I was a part of a community.
Right.
It was an experience with between me and my husband.
Hmm.
Period.
Right.
It was an intimate experience.
And I think that's great. That's what they're doing, you know? And that's the thing too, is I feel like part of this is that we often have these conversations as though there's only one role. There's lots of roles for food and for restaurants. And this is actually something that we're talking about right now at Granor, is like, because my role is changing. I'm opening this cooking school. Did you know this? I'm opening a cooking school for home cooks with my husband.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so I go, it's actually my last like full week at Granor. Thankfully, I get to stay at Granor, and I'm moving to an at-large director role. So my job is is to like support staff and programming development and outreach. And so right now, Chef Alex, who's been in the team for 2 years, and Jamie Marsh, who just came on as a general manager, as well as Jen and Anna and Joseph and Jake, our leadership team, you know, but the dining program in particular has an opportunity that, like, if they want to change what the format is, if they wanted to go to a French Laundry style, we could do that. You know, like that would be a totally appropriate thing for a new chef who's really leading the program to come in and say. We hired Alex in part because that's not her motivation. And I think, but every time we have a new cook, Alex is the exception. They're there for a couple of months, and then they come to us with this idea of how we can elevate what we do. And it always is to make it fancier and to make it more fussy, which does not work for banquet style seating. And it does not work for what we're trying to do here. And so, but you don't want to shut down the conversation, because sometimes good ideas come out of that. But if it's always about, like, is it centering the guest? Is the guest better off with these changes? Is the farm better off with these changes? Or are just you as a cook better off with these changes? Like, do you get to prove your mettle a little bit more? And so that's where I think, is Granor fine dining? No, it is not French Laundry. It is not trying to be French Laundry. We are serving a different mission. And I think of Granor as the house that you go to, that it's just like the most stylish friend's house, but it feels good. But like nothing is like dramatic, but everything, but the texture of the fabric feels good. The paint color on the wall like sings, and the meal is intentional and has a point of view. And so like, and I think that's like, I've realized like what I'm after with everything is a point of view. And because otherwise it's just same. You can find it on Instagram and then go, and like, it's going to look good. It's going to look like everybody else's, like round mirror, you know, black grout, like whatever that is. And I got black grout in my kitchen too, because I totally like did it. And I had like white tile when we bought the house, and the grout was like super stained. And I was like, I don't have the ability to clean this, so I'm going to paint over it. You know, but like, it's not, I don't know, you can make people feel comfortable by being something familiar, but sometimes that familiarity, it's like the Olive Garden effect. Like this was part of Olive Garden's founding not, it wasn't their mission, but it was in like their guiding principles, was that they were out to create a space that could be anywhere, so that you could go to any Olive Garden and like feel like you're exclusively at Olive Garden. It doesn't matter if you're in Schaumburg or if you're in Tokyo or if you're in, I don't know, pick another place that's different than those two. But like you're at Olive Garden. That's not my interest.
I want to shift into food and your personal relationships and how you've found yourself, or have you noticed how has your approach in the kitchen and your relationship with cooking, how maybe some of those lessons have translated into your relationships? Are you aware of for instance, patience? You mentioned the need to organize earlier. You mentioned with the story about the sauce, replacing it with the
Sour cream.
With the sour cream. That I heard flexibility versus rigidity. Waste not, want not, failure. Have you noticed some of these things bleeding into how you relate to people in your life?
Yeah. I mean, I think that because they're coming from the same place. I think that what, do you ever have it where, say you have your sister is turning 50, just like throw a number out there. My sister just turned 50. That's why it's in my mind. And I like had a outfit all picked out. And I was like, I had this like vision of it in my mind. And then the day of the event, I'm like running around, I'm doing stuff, and I go to put this outfit on, and it looks like I am a person wearing someone else's outfit. And, but it was like what was in my mind. And so it's like I could stay tied to that idea of the should, of like, this is what I had planned. And then I was like, F it, this isn't working. And so just went to something that I've had in my closet for years that like I knew I could partially cater this party in, could dance in, like all of those things. But it takes the ability to
pivot,
dispassionately assess what the situation actually needs.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
That makes sense. So, and then like, as far as how it affects relationships, like, I don't know. I mean, I think it gets back to like, what is your motivator? So like, Priya Parker has an amazing book called The Art of Gathering. Do you know this book? She was like somebody who organizes events for a living. She's not an event planner or like a wedding coordinator. She does like, I don't think she actually did this, but like imagine like the Good Friday Accords, or the Camp David meeting, she's like brought in to be sure that the design of the space and the weekend and the flow, that everything design wise is feeding into the mission of this meeting, and which I find fascinating. And so like, what are the design choices that you can make to influence how someone feels, which can then elicit a outcome. And so I think that she talks a lot about like, you have to really carefully assess like why you're doing something. And so it's the same thing too. It's like, if you're having a dinner party so that you can show off, then you have to like have food that's going to be kind of show off. And that's fine. If you're having a dinner party because someone just got divorced and they're pretty tender, then it has a different outcome, and so I think it's just about being honest about that. And I think that understanding that via food has helped me to understand it with a lot of different things.
I want to ask you about family recipes. So you mentioned that you were a farmer. Was in your background that made you that way?
I mean, I grew up in a family farm. My grandfather was a pickle farmer we grew cucumbers primarily for Heinz. My cousins now farm that land. It's my dad's dad. My dad is the generation that moved away from the farm, but he was also farming for a while. So I'll try to do this like real fast. But so my grandfather, dropped out of school in the 8th grade to farm for his family. My grandmother never went to a higher education, but became the first female principal of her school, both incredibly smart people. My grandfather functioningly illiterate, my grandmother a principal of a school. They had one child, not by choice, and my dad, and education was always the silver bullet. It was the absolute priority all the time.
Okay.
He was the first one in his family to go to college, then went on to medical school. Met my mom. My mom grew up in a very misogynistic household where she was told she was not worth educating because she was a woman. Her brothers were educated. She thankfully had enough self-possession to get out of there and went to nurses training, became a nurse, thankfully had a great mentor who said, I think that you are interested in more, and brought her into the fold of being a certified registered nurse of anesthesia. So she was an anesthesiologist, but she wasn't an MD. She met my dad when he was in medical school, convinced him, they got married. She convinced him to become an anesthesiologist. So they had this like dual practice. When he was in his anesthesia residency, early on, the family farm started to fail because my grandfather was converting from migrant hand labor to mechanized labor, and he was struggling with the big equipment. And so my dad, despite not liking his parents, not liking where he grew up, he went back because the way he described it to me is that they were a very conservative family, but very progressive in that they took all of their income from the farm and from my grandmother's school teacher principal job, divided it 3 ways. And that was the money that sent him to college and to medical school. So if he were to turn his back on the farm, it was disloyal to what had sent him to these places. So he came back. They started farming together at night. My dad became the vice president of the hospital in Kalamazoo. They had their kids. And all of a sudden that hospital, he was kind of doing both. And then that hospital was taken over. All of the administrators were blanket fired. And so my dad is now, doesn't want to be a farmer anymore. Doesn't need to be a farmer anymore and doesn't have a job. And so he then moved to Chicago for 3 years to do his residency at Illinois Masonic. And so each of my sisters, my family was really big on the fact that they didn't intend to raise us where they raised us. And so they said, you have to leave for a while. So our 8th grade year, we were supposed to be gone from our hometown. And so my sisters each lived in Chicago for a year, but I'm a lot younger than them. And so then my mom and I ended up moving to India, which is a whole other story. But so I always grew up around ag, but never really valued it. And then when I went to college at University of Michigan, it was really the first time that I was like, oh, you people don't know anything about farming. Like you don't know anything about an agricultural economy. And it just kind of came up in like, history classes and English classes. I was like, all those things. And it came up because I went from being the most liberal person in my high school to being like a more conservative person at U of M, and like feeling very podunk most of the time. But like in Hamilton, we were the like fancy family, so it was like, it's just a weird how those identities are constructed and then like flipped
context.
around. Yeah, exactly. And code switching. And so that's how then I started working at Zingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor. And it was, luck would have it, Roger Bowser, who's a very dear friend of mine now and was a tangential family friend at the time. He was bringing in locally produced produce into this very high volume legacy business. And all of a sudden I was seeing all these ingredients I had never seen before, like speckled romaine and these beautiful heirloom tomatoes. I'd never seen an heirloom tomato before. We went and harvested asparagus together, and like I grew up around asparagus farms, but I didn't actually know how it grew. And so it was there that I started to really I had always cooked. My mom was an amazing cook. I always cooked and like would bring muffins to school and like do all this stuff, and always worked in restaurants so that I didn't have to stay working on the farm. And so I like really decided to take a chance on cooking. Roger encouraged me to go to Ballymaloe, which is the cooking school in Ireland where I went to school. It's on a 100-acre working organic farm. And it was there that I realized the role that a chef might have in illuminating agricultural production, and decided that's what I wanted my niche to be. That's again long-winded answer to your question.
So then, through all of that, are there any family recipes that you gravitate towards?
It's funny because the family recipes are not tied to our garden or our farm. You know, like we were a pickle farming family. We didn't actually make pickles that often. We certainly didn't have like a fermented pickle tradition. There's a thing called pickle soup that I learned about after I left my family. But I've kind of adopted it as like a family recipe because of the story. So like the family recipes, although, you know, I just threw, do you know Molly Cobelt, one of the owners of Out There? Anyway, she is a good friend and is part of how I got out into this area of Michigan. We had her baby shower at my house on Sunday, and her former business partner Heidi and is also like, we all kind of came up in like the similar sort of era of food. And I was like, I want to make the strawberry punch that I had at my like high school graduation. And so I like went back, and my sister, when my mom died, like typed up all of her like note cards and recipe cards and things like that. So I found the Word document, found the strawberry punch recipe, and it's like 2 cans of like store-bought pink lemonade, 20 ounces of 7-Up, a quart or 2 quarts of vanilla ice cream, and like 4 cups of water.
Oh, wow.
And then like frozen strawberries, 40 ounces of frozen strawberries that you just put in there kind of like ice cubes. It is so good. And it's like, but it's so funny and weird and like so intense. And it's just like, and I remember I was like talking to Heidi and Matt about it when we were setting up. I was like, you guys, I'm making this punch, but this might be one of those times where like in my memory, it's so good, but like maybe with my current taste, it won't be that good. And I was telling them about it as we were like doing other stuff. And Matt was like, legit, I had the same punch in my family growing up. So we made it and we both were like, oh yeah. It's like drinking, you know, a Coke or whatever. Like in the same way, I don't think if I were to go back and eat like Lunchables, it would be like as nostalgic, but this like really worked.
Food and memory and that
and then
power.
There's a few things my mom made that we always talk about. Like she took one Le Cordon Bleu cooking class and made this like chicken and cream sauce that is so with white wine. That's so good. So like we still talk about that. She had like a pork tenderloin that she marinated in like soy sauce and ginger and sesame oil, I think, or whatever. And like, but yeah, she was such a good cook. We didn't have like any like real traditions in that.
That's also an interesting point too. Like, for someone who likes to learn and who likes to experiment in the kitchen, like I like trying different things, but then I think about when I'm not here anymore and it's just my girls, will they be able to go mom's X recipe? And I don't know if they will.
Right.
Or if that's important. I don't know.
But they might have, like, we had a salad and it was like bagged iceberg lettuce, you know, with the little like teeny tiny shreds of red cabbage and carrot most of the time with like French, like jarred dressing. But we had a salad with almost every meal. And like, I'm hard pressed to think of a meal that I've cooked at home where there's not some form of greens.
I see.
You know, so I bet there's like structure that's there because and that's the other thing too. I remember I was teaching a cooking class once and I was describing like why I was struggling with some part of the menu. And I was like, well, cause like this, but you wouldn't put that at the beginning. That doesn't make any sense. And they were like, what do you mean that doesn't make any sense? And I was like, well, I don't know, you just wouldn't have shrimp. You wouldn't have it in that place in the thing. And I was like, is this coming from like cooking school, like menu theory? Or is it coming from like how we ate growing up? Like my dad loves the salad before the main course. I tend to prefer it afterwards, but like, I don't really care that much. And like a Frenchman might be like, why would you serve me the salad before the main, you know, like, it's just that's culture, you know, that's like,
culture identity. Stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah, and I always think about it. So, like, I guess another family recipe, my first actual understanding of culture and like what culture is was when I realized my family does fondue on Christmas Eve.
Mm.
It started out because my mom was making a bunch every year. She would make something different, and we still went to church like at the like late service on Christmas Eve. So we would have like dinner beforehand, then we'd go to church, and one year she made fondue and everyone loved it. And so it just became the tradition. And I remember when maybe it was probably in college, I was like, wait, you guys don't have fondue on Christmas Eve? And I was like, that's crazy. And like, it just seemed like unfathomable to me. And I was like, oh, that's what culture is. It's like just something that you kind of take for granted as the way you do stuff. Yeah. So I guess that's a family recipe. We always had lamb on Easter, which I always was like, but aren't we talking about like the Lamb of God? Is that what this is? And I was like very stressed about it when I was little. I'm like not currently religious. And so it's always funny thinking back to some of those things where I was like,
Sure.
this seems like a really weird story. Like he's got to carry that cross around. And then like, I don't know.
um, do you want to expand on or because we've touched on it like a little bit throughout the conversation. Do you want to kind of maybe more specifically address how you navigate serving others and taking care of yourself? It's like, so I'm a retired physician. And, that idea of Dr. Heal Thyself, that's true. You're the last person to take good care of yourself. So
also, a lot of you guys smoke, I've realized. A lot of doctors smoke.
Yeah, that's
crazy.
I never did. Weird. But anyhow, human. Yeah, human. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, this is a little bit of a kind of off to the side, meandering, but I do think that we make choices as to what will, like knowing choices, this is soothing me and I know it's going to harm me, but I need the soothing more. And I know better, but who cares? We're all going to die anyway.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Nothing matters.
But so how do you navigate that? Do you find that, because it is hard to put others before yourself during your work day. And then where do you find the energy and intentionality to take care of yourself when you're done with all of that? Because you got a kid too.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's a very interesting question in this last year or so, because traditionally I'm a fairly insensitive person. Like I'm sensitive. I have feelings, but like I have an insensitive body in that like I am built for long days, hard, like physical work. Like I'm structurally sound in that way. And so things like when people talk about self-care or like, I don't usually feel victim to some of the things that like are stressful for other people.
Okay.
And so it's been kind of a struggle, but having Lark, I realized pretty early on that if I would get short with him, even as like a baby, if I was trying to get stuff done at work. Or for work. Like if I was trying to like do something on the side and then like this baby wanted me and I would like get mad at the baby, and I was like, that's weird. And so I started to realize that was probably true in other parts of my life. And I just had never really paid attention to it before. But that I was like, well, it's really not fair to Eric or Lark or even me if I'm like, short with them or easily aggravated because I chose to prioritize work. And like, for me, it's not prioritizing like the nebulous idea of work or of Granor. It's like, it's the people who work at Granor. And so that's where I always got kind of hung up, where I was like, but it's just like, why is this person, like, why would I make it harder? Like, here's an example. Restaurants everywhere. You call in sick. It's not like an office job where like things can just sit and wait until you get better and come back to it. And that's like a disparaging view of office work. I'm sure there's things that are more important. But like, if you are not there, the same workload needs to happen generally. So it just means that it's divided across 5 people instead of 6 people. And so like, whenever people would call out sick, I was like, are they really like sick enough to ask 5 people to take on 20% more work? And like, that was in my mind when I would be sick and I would like work through it. And I still kind of believe that, but then I also realized like for me to feel that way, it has to be shared. And so like, I've had times where I'm like, I love working a 70-hour work week. Sometimes it's like, some of those are the most fun weeks because it's busy, you're banging, you're hitting, like getting all the marks, you're like getting everything done, like super efficient. But then when it's like, wait a second, I'm working 70 hours a week. My team is working 65 hours a week. And then there's this other person who is making the same amount of money as me and is working 35 hours a week. And it's like, that is a very vicious tone of voice that comes out then, you know? And so that's when I realized like, oh, I'm only doing this because it's for the team mentality. And like, am I actually undercutting the team by working to a point of shortness or fatigue, you know, and things like that. And some of that has come with having a different role. And I remember, Molly Brew, who used to work here, who has much more experience. She was always like 5 years ahead of me, you know, in terms of like her understanding of things. And she said, you're going to have to get comfortable with the fact that at some point and some point soon, the best thing you can do for Granor is stay home, think about a problem that you guys are dealing with, and then go for a walk and let the solution come to you. And that is very different than like, I came up with servant leadership where it's like, as the leader, if you walk in and everyone's working hard and everything's going well, but the trash is overflowing, you take the trash so that then nobody else has to stop what they're doing in their like very like, you know, choreographed dance that they're doing. But then sometimes you just end up becoming the person that takes out the trash. And like, that's not actually helping either.
Right.
So it's like a balance. But as far as like what that means in terms of care or whatever, I don't know. It's a very, it seems very situation specific.
Do you think because what I've heard through the entire conversation is that you are yourself? You're not showing up, you know, as this is a job that I need to get through and then I can be myself once I leave it. It sounds like you are yourself in work and at home. And so maybe you are in a way taking care of yourself because you're being yourself.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I think that that's true. And I feel very fortunate that that's the case. Like, you know, there's also that Maya Angelou anecdote where she was cleaning houses when she was young, and somebody mistreated her, and she was all worked up about it and came home, and her dad said to her, no, that's your job. You go there, do the work so that you can come home and be with us, you know? And like, I remember, and that was like really revelatory for her. And I remember I've tried to like adopt that. And then I realized that actually there's times when I can think about it that way. But the reality is that I'm in a very fortunate situation where I've been able to craft a career where I am myself and that this work is like part of my identity. Changing my role at Granor has led to some necessary questions about identity shift. And so I'm realizing like, I'm thankful that I have enough of an identity outside of Granor because I don't own Granor. I've just worked here for a long time. It's not mine and it never will be and it never should be. And so like this is a conversation that came up recently. I had a week where I was working a lot, and one of my coworkers, who's like a very sensitive and thoughtful person, was like, she was feeling bad about that. She was like, "You're just getting pulled in so many directions, and like so much is asked of you." And I was like, "Look, I'm not the victim here. Like, I feel 100% responsible for all things all the time. That means I also have 100% autonomy. And like, that's how I view it. That's the balance for me, is that
That's
like,
interesting.
so they're totally balanced in that, like, because I was like, I very thankfully, very rarely, and in a separate sort of part of my world, I don't do anything I don't want to do. And that is so fortunate that how dare I bemoan the work that it takes to have that life. And so because I have done the work to cultivate this and am responsible for a lot of things, I feel 100% responsible. But that also means that like when the work is done or when it's somebody else's job to do it, like I'm going to cut out. I'm not going to ask for anyone's permission to leave half hour early so I can get my son and take him to go to ice cream. You know, like it just would never occur to me. But that's also 10 years in. And it might just be kind of how I'm wired too. But I do think that it's like, I just came back to this essay. I come back to it periodically. Do you know Joan Didion's essay on self-respect? It's so good. It's in Slouching Towards Bethlehem, that collection of essays. And I mean, she's like a little bit like California literati, you know, so like you have to kind of take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. Some of the references I don't get and things, because I'm not like that highbrow, but she basically says like to have self-respect means like to not have it is like you can't do anything. And if you have self-respect, it doesn't make you moral. It just means that you know what the costs are. And it's worth looking at because she says it much better. But there's kind of two salient points of that essay to me, which is that, you know, again, getting back to the idea of it's not moral. If a person with self-respect commits adultery, they're not going to try to hide it and shirk from it. They're doing it knowing the odds and knowing the risks. And they're making that choice anyway. And then subsequently, the other part that I think is salient is if you are trying, how does she put it? She says, if you're trying to answer the question of who you are based on other people's perceptions, like your perception of what you think other people think of you, pretty soon you're going to call out for who's there and realize no one's home because those perceptions are not real. Yeah, it's so good.
That's that people pleasing thing. That stuff. Yeah. I just learned this recently about someone told me, it hurt my feelings. She said that people pleasing is dishonest. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. You're being nice to people. No, it's not, because you're not yourself. You're being a dishonest version of yourself by people pleasing.
Well, and so that's where it comes back to the intention that like, I love cooking for people because it brings them pleasure or it feeds them. It brings them nourishment. And I said this at one point. I did an episode of The Dish on CBS, and they always ask a question that like, if you could cook for anybody at any point, who would it be? And I still can't believe I was able to get this out without choking up with tears. But I said, if I could cook for anybody in this world, it would, I don't know if I can do it today. It would be for Harriet Tubman, because what I want to do with food is to like provide that little bit of rest for people. And imagine someone who went into unimaginably dangerous situations again and again and again and again, and to take care of other people, to lift them out of that danger, and to be able to make a meal so that she could put her feet up and rest for a second. But like, that idea of pleasing or pleasuring or providing someone that respite is not inherently devaluing yourself. I don't think that's dishonest. I think if you were to do that in a way that is like not you, or that is feigned because you think it's what they want, if you're contorting yourself, like, then sure.
Or
but
you're
like,
disappearing.
Right. Exactly. Like, I had a very terrible boss at one point, and it wasn't that long ago. I mean, it was before Granor. But he literally told me, you're unapproachable and you should try smiling more. And I was like,
not misogynistic at all.
And I was like, I smile when I'm pleased. You should try pleasing me more. And I was like, and I was talking to the manager. I was like, can you believe this guy? He actually said, like, you should smile more. Has he not, like, watched the news? Like, literally that meme, like, just happened. And there was one other leader in the business who said, I was also told the same thing. And I was like, that's weird, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, because you're a man. He's like, yeah, but I'm a black man. And I was like, got it.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's like, that is, if you're smiling to please that person, even when you're furious, like, yeah, that is dishonest. But I don't
know. So the question, it's beautiful. Who would you want to cook for? Who wouldn't you cook for?
I mean, the list is getting longer every day. It's true on the news. I don't want to cook for anybody that places themselves above other people. Like, I was thinking about this recently. I was having a conversation with someone about, there's a regional grocery store chain, the Meyer stores, and I was, speaking disparagingly of the family that owns that grocery chain. And they came up in, they started in Western Michigan. That's where I'm from. And somebody else who was from Western Michigan was like, yeah, but they've done so much for Grand Rapids. I was like, I don't care. You are worth $6.9 billion and you're willing to fight the $15 an hour minimum wage. That means that you earn money off from people suffering. And that also probably means that you earned money off from the people who produce the goods that those people are paid to put on the shelves. No thanks. And so I don't want to cook for those people. And so, like, I was never a good private chef. Like, I find that part of society, it fills me with a rage that is surprising to me, because I just, like, I can't imagine being Elon Musk, who could literally give every single person on this planet $1 million and still have billions of dollars to themselves.
So I think I can 100% agree with you.
Like, that guy can find his own fucking dinner.
But I really, no, you're okay. But I really believe that once you have so much, you leave the human realm.
Yeah.
Because really imagine if you didn't have to worry about calling your husband's doctor, or okay, he has an appointment and you need to drive him there. Right. Your son, we can go on and on. Imagine if you take yourself out of those earthly grounding things that you've got to worry about. My driveway needs to be plowed. Right. I got to call the landscaper. Imagine if none of that even matters anymore. And then you surround yourself with other non-humans who are just now vying with each other for who's the most powerful. Why would you think of other people? Right. I'm not saying it's great, but that's the only thing I've been able to kind of think of. Like, they're not human. People say, but they're human. No, they're not. No, they're not.
They should act like it then. And I think that's where what the Disney heir, whose name I'm forgetting, the daughter, has said she thinks that everyone should have to fly commercial. That private jets are like an absolute cancer on our society. I mean, they're absolute cancer in terms of climate collapse as well. But, she was like, when you are so stratified and isolated, you can't remember what that's like. Exactly. And I was just actually I was driving home from Grand Rapids last night. I was listening to The Daily, and I was going to say, I don't care about Jeffrey Epstein. I don't care at all about this like conspiracy theory about Jeffrey Epstein. I care deeply that man was able to hurt so many people. But like, it was the first time I really heard about when he was arrested in 2019. And like, he was literally flying back on his private jet from Paris and landed in New Jersey. And within 3 hours was in general population at MCC. And it's like, what an unimaginable turn of events that must have been,
Mm,
and all of a sudden, and it's like, if you can't remember that by like, there go I, but for the grace of God, there go I. And like, if you are not your brother's keeper. And so I guess for me, one of the big things about this cooking school is also trying to create a space that is an economic mixing place. That's something we try to do at Granor as well. But like,
mm-hmm.
I don't think that you can be your brother's keeper without understanding, a little bit of what they're going through. And
Absolutely.
I just think that like the wealth stratification, and we've seen it before. It happened in 1920 as well. It happened, I'm sure, every 100 years before that. And so like, I'm not naive enough to think that it's like, I'm not willing to think that it's not correctable. But yeah, I think that like people should enjoy food. And one of the ways that you can enjoy it is also to remember that you enjoy it because it is often scarce. And like, and I was actually just thinking about this too, that like, when you have like pleasure heaped upon pleasure and it starts to like dull it, it's like,
that's another thing.
Erin, who works here, we were talking about our weekends, and she went home to her family in Elmhurst, and her uncle came over, and they had just been in Scotland. So they brought this bottle of scotch back for Erin's dad. And I was just thinking about, I don't know why, because we weren't talking about it, but I was just thinking like this like special thing, like I brought you this special thing. And so then they like all had some, and they were talking about the trip, and they were just like connecting. And like, a lot of our instincts as humans is to say, oh, there's a special thing. Let's have more of it. Let's have like, we should have 3 bottles of scotch so that we don't run out, so that we don't lose this special thing, but we'll just have more of it. But like, it also devalues the specialness, because then it's just ubiquitous, or it stops being this special thing if you have access to it all the time. So I think that food has this like interesting role of like, more isn't always better. And thinking about like, how can I don't want people to like not enjoy their meal because they're thinking about people who don't have enough, but I do think they should feel gratitude for what they are enjoying, recognizing that it is a specialty.
So that requires, coming back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, it requires being intentional. It requires presence. It requires slowing down. And you've got messaging that's constantly telling you to be distracted and unfocused and fast. So it's hard you got to stop to practice gratitude. You got to notice to practice gratitude.
And that's where I am really compelled by Michael Pollan's most recent writings about like, our attention is maybe I used to always think time was the most valuable resource, but I think that maybe our attention is.
Well, that's why everything is doing social media, you name it in the zeitgeist. That's why everything is doing so well, because they've understood how to purchase our attention and to grab the attention, because it's so valuable.
And we didn't even realize it was so valuable, And so I think that, when I think about what do I want Lark to inherit from us, what do I want to model for him for it? I do think that like the ability to not have comparative living, I think comparison is definitely the robber of joy.
True.
But then also, like slowing down. And I was driving yesterday, so I had time to listen to the podcast, but I was listening to, there's a piece in the Atlantic about what a teacher learned by ditching the screens. And there's this teacher in Colorado who like was a math teacher and like fully embraced like Chromebooks and this like software and all this sort of stuff. And then at some point he just like nixed it. And he took 2 months with no screens. And he said, it was like immediate change, that he was suddenly able to teach again instead of monitor and help. And that like the percentage rate of completing the problems or the projects like shot way up. And he said this interesting thing where he was like, I was more fatigued when I was done at the end of the day, because it is harder, but I felt better, and like, there's this, again, pleasure from fatigue is an okay thing. And so I think that there's something to that in all of our lives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, as I ask every guest at the end, before I get to that, first of all, I just want to thank you for an incredibly rich conversation. I am so filled with newness and inspiration after having shared this time with you. So I thank you for that. I am going to ask you now, what is your personal definition of what it means to be healthy?
That my personal definition of healthiness is probably the absence of pathology. That like, and bear with me, that sounds really like stupid and heady, and I recognize that, but like, it means that everything's like functioning well. Like there's no warning signs or like systems that aren't working. And sometimes that requires testing the systems. So like for me, that's like having like my immediate thing is I'm trying to get stronger. In part because like I would like to lose a little bit of weight, but it's like I think it's okay to like want to look good naked. I think as long as you're like that definition of what looks good is not being unduly influenced by unreasonable standards. But like I'm also recognizing like I was older when I had my son. I was 39, and so by the time he's my age, I'm gonna be in my 80s, and I want to be healthy enough to physically do things and to not like moan about it. And I also want to be mentally healthy enough that I'm not a burden and that I'm able to enjoy it, so like I've been thinking about this. I'm so curious. And I also want to hear about like how this podcast feeds you and like sort of where these questions comes from. I feel like I've just been talking nonstop. Yeah. But I'm really struck by this idea. I can't remember where I read this, probably The Atlantic somewhere, because that's like one of the few subscriptions I still have. But about how like forgetfulness is not historically a part of aging. It doesn't have to be. But that like it can show it's like an indication of some cognitive decline, but cognitive decline isn't like inherently tied to aging. And that like one of the kind of facets of this piece was like, we've sort of decided that it is. And so we have a lot of like undisciplined language around like, oh, it was a senior moment, or like, oh, my like aging
the power
brain.
Of language. Agreed, 100%.
And so it's kind of like, just don't say that, and like, just don't believe it, and like, let it just not like, will yourself into it. Obviously like Alzheimer's, dementia, that's a different thing. But like, I don't know. I kind of think of it that way. Like, I don't want to just believe like, oh, well, I'm 60 now, and so I'm not going to be able to lift that. It's like,
no, but you've made that choice and you're cognizant of it versus being passive and being distracted. And it's easy to just kind of believe something that you've heard very quickly and not delve into it. That takes, once again, presence and pausing, being uncomfortable because you're pausing, being uncomfortable because you don't know and you have to think about something differently or challenge the way you're thinking. That's not fun.
Right.
Fun is black and white. It's easy. Your brain feels better that way. Your brain likes to compartmentalize things as simply and quickly as possible, be efficient. So what we're talking about takes slowing down and discipline and willingness. How does this podcast feed me? Ooh, in many ways. It's just really been an interesting version. I haven't, like you, been myself for as long as you've been yourself. It took me after 40 to start being myself. I had the original career, which was medicine. I was a pathologist, and that was from an immigrant background, first generation Haitian. Education. And because I My parents were not college educated, from another country. I didn't have a role model. So
Mm.
figuring things out, and although that's not completely true, my uncle did come from Haiti, and he went to medical school, and lived with us for most of it. But there was a lot of figuring out. There was a lot of grit. Put your head down, must succeed
Mm-hmm.
to be worthy. Yeah, to be worthy.
Yeah, to be worthy of their sacrifice.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And also not just their sacrifice, but worthy to be amongst these people practicing medicine. Okay. So there was that. And it burned me out to such a degree where I had just a crisis. I didn't want to be here anymore. So it was a come to Jesus moment, and I decided, okay, this can't be. And with social support, I stopped and realized that I didn't want to go back to medicine, because there was a lot of, oh, maybe you should try something different or try another job. Really easy to say when you're on the outside looking in, but it was just I was done.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I started to come into myself, and I yoga became my path through my mother's cancer and taking her to her first yoga class and my first yoga class. And then when I was in crisis and I didn't know what I was going to do next, I went to a yoga studio. They had just started a yoga teacher training program. Coincidentally, invited me to do so. I did it. And then it became kind of an organic, I like being part of the community. I like actually helping people in small groups who don't look or feel like everyone else. So I never liked teaching in a studio, the bodies that could do all of that was not my thing. Right. I get it, but I never enjoyed it. What I did enjoy was starting to learn how to teach chair yoga, going to assisted living facilities. Right. Just that was just me. I felt called to, I loved my seniors. And so I wanted to be with people of that age. Yeah. And so I just started gravitating towards finding them in the community and teaching yoga. How did I get to the podcast? Is yoga teacher led to an opportunity to become a health coach in a program where I was teaching in a gym. And then that led to finding the Seth Godin universe, where I took their first podcast fellowship. I like to learn, and I like to, that's how I identify. That's one of my parts of my identity, is hopefully a curious person who needs to keep learning. So podcasting was like, oh, this would be yet another platform where it could expand this idea that I learned when I became a health coach, which was, and it blew my mind, that health is not just the physical and the mental, which everyone talks about, but it was 6 dimensions: physical, social, emotional, mental, intellectual, and spiritual. And that just made so much sense to me. So I was like, well, why is nobody talking about all of these things and how important they are, and how there's a dance to balance these different dimensions, and they're all so important. And you can take a deep dive, because I love deep dives, as you can tell, deep dive into each one of these dimensions and really explore, what does it mean to be a socially healthy person? What can that mean for me? Like, I'd never thought about it that way. Not just to serve a patient or teach a yoga student, but for me, service is very important. That's why I became a doctor. So how can I use that instinct, that part of me, in my community in other ways? So that makes me feel healthier. The other thing about the podcast is I'm an introvert. I hate parties. I hate big crowds. A party to me is kryptonite. I can't stand holding a drink with a napkin and being surrounded by a bunch of people having small talk. I'm the person you're going to find. If I'm trapped at a party, I will find a corner. I'll find that one person, and we will deep dive, and I will stay there. Okay. So the podcast feeds my curiosity. It feeds my energy giving one-on-one nerding out learning, all those things. And then I get to socially share this with people. So even if someone takes a lesson, has a one light bulb moment from a conversation, that's happiness to me. That's joy. That's part of why I'm here.
I love that so much.
Thank you for asking.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, it's cool. And it's like, it's cool to, like what you were saying about recognizing introvertedness and then being able to like adapt to suit it. I think that's like one of the most powerful things people can do, instead of trying to be someone that you're not, it's like I have other strengths. And so I might as well lean into those and then like figure out how I can like reroute some of them, But
absolutely.
That's cool. Oh man. Well, thank you so much for continuing to like reach out and your patience with me. Like
it was worth it.
Well, likewise. And I feel so nice having gotten to know a bit more about you. And I think that's my other favorite thing about food, and about like also a public business is that everyone is a universe into themselves. And, you get to like hear people's stories and like where they're coming from. And I just think that's so beautiful.
Wise women, move from last place to first place in your life. Stop using your body as a battlefield. Let's raise health together with a customized health plan just for you. Contact me at npkhealthintegration.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.